On the day I received my husband's gastric cancer diagnosis report, he confessed to me that he had another woman outside. He said, "Evelyn has been by my side for many years. She accompanied me through hardships and helped me start my business. Now that she's pregnant, I must give her a proper status. Let's get a divorce. I'll take the company. And you can have all the other properties." I looked at the man's face, which was filled with a mixture of restraint and affection. Although my heart ached, I still nodded briskly. Fine, let's get divorced. Since he was on the verge of death, I should at least fulfill his last wish. James had been suffering from stomachaches recently, and would occasionally retch. Worried about his health, I dragged him to the hospital for relevant examinations. The gastroscopy had just been completed. After receiving a phone call, James told me that there was an urgent matter in the company and he needed to rush back immediately. The examination report on the machine was still being printed, and James had already disappeared. I took the examination report and went to see the doctor. The doctor looked at the various examination results, and his brows gradually furrowed. He said in a serious tone, "The situation is not good. The tumor markers in his blood test are more than 1,000 times higher than the standard value. The gastroscopy shows that the gastric wall is abnormally thickened, and there are also irregular lumps." I interrupted the doctor anxiously. "Doctor, please just tell me directly. Is my husband's stomach problem very serious?" The doctor nodded. "Currently, it is diagnosed as gastric cancer. But to determine which specific stage it has developed to, further tissue biopsy is needed. Please ask your husband to be admitted to the hospital as soon as possible for treatment and examination." I hardly listened to what the doctor said later. All I could hear was a buzzing sound in my head. I stumbled out of the hospital. My mind was in a mess. And I didn't know how to tell James about his illness. When I got home, I looked at the examination report and cried so much that my eyes were swollen. I couldn't imagine how I would live without him. It was almost time for James to get off work. I suppressed my sad emotions and went to the kitchen to prepare dinner for him. Over the years, James often had to accompany clients to drink alcohol for business negotiations and to secure business. As time went by, he developed a chronic stomach problem. In order to nourish his stomach, I made different kinds of stomach-nourishing porridge every day. Our diet was mainly light. Afraid that the food outside was too greasy, I would drive to his company every day to deliver his lunch after making it. But even though I was so careful, we still couldn't escape the teasing of fate. Just thinking that the handsome and dashing him was about to face chemotherapy, radiotherapy, etc. My tears welled up again. When James came back, it was already completely dark. I had been crying for so long that my head was dizzy, and I was feebly lying on the dining table. When James saw me, he couldn't help frowning. "If you're tired, go to the room and rest. What's the point of lying on the dining table?" I forced myself to sit up and tried my best to organize my words in my mind. I was thinking about how to tell him about his illness euphemistically. Seeing that I didn't respond for a long time, James impatiently tugged at his tie and said, "I've already eaten outside. You can eat by yourself. I'm going to take a shower first." After saying that, he went straight to the second floor. When I went upstairs with the examination report, James had already taken a shower and entered the study. I knocked on the door of the study. "Honey, are you still dealing with work?" James's faint voice came from inside. "Yeah, I'm busy." I stood there for 2 minutes and then spoke again. "I have something I want to talk to you about. Can I come in?" There was a long silence inside before he said, "I'm about to have a video conference. Let's talk about it later." I let out a long sigh. Since the company went public, James's work had become even busier. In the past 6 months, he either had to work overtime or often went on business trips. He looked much more haggard. Just as I was about to turn around and go back to my room, the notification sound of WeChat messages came from downstairs. It rang 3 or 5 times in a row. I thought James had left his phone downstairs. Thinking that he was about to have a video conference and might need his phone, I quickly walked downstairs to bring it up to him. But the sound didn't come from the phone. Instead, it came from James's tablet computer. It should be that he logged into the same WeChat account, so the messages were sensed. Although the tablet was locked, WeChat messages kept popping up one after another. I'm telling you, don't sleep in the same bed as that old woman or you won't be able to touch me again. You promised to mention the divorce to her when you got home today. You can't lie to me. If you don't get a divorce soon, I'll go to the hospital and have the baby aborted tomorrow. I knew the person who sent the messages. It was James's assistant, Evelyn. I was like being struck by lightning. I stood there frozen, holding the tablet computer. For a moment, I couldn't tell if this scene was real or illusory. James and I were college classmates. We dated for 4 years and were married for 10 years. We had been together for a total of 14 years. To accompany him in starting his business, I quit my stable job in the public sector. When the company was facing difficulties in capital turnover, I took out all my dowry and savings and handed them all to him. On countless nights, we stayed up all night to create a plan that would satisfy the client. In countless rounds of negotiations, we repeatedly negotiated to strive for the maximum benefit and the cooperation. Our friends around us all said that we had had a tough time over the years. Fortunately, all the hardships had finally paid off. Later, the company gradually got on the right track. We recruited highly educated and capable talents, and I gradually delegated the work in my hands. My parents-in-law urged us to have a child. They said that since James and I had been married for many years without having a child, they were almost drowned by the gossip of relatives in our hometown. So I put aside my work and started to focus on preparing for pregnancy. Probably starting from a year ago, James's work suddenly became very busy. He started going on business trips frequently. Every time he came home, he was always listless. After going to bed, he either read the news on his phone or fell asleep immediately. I reminded him that we were preparing for pregnancy. Without a sexual life, no matter how capable I was, I couldn't have a child by myself. But every time James would wave his hand warily, I'm really tired. Anyway, we haven't had a child for so many years. It doesn't matter if it's a day or two. Go to bed early. I thought he was just too tired. I never thought that he had found another woman behind my back. I held James's diagnosis report tightly in my hand. And one day, I received 2 major blows. It was really ironic when I thought about it. I wanted to slap the diagnosis report in James's face and tell him that this was the retribution for his infidelity. But in the end, I held back. When I went upstairs again, the door of James's study opened. When he saw me coming up from downstairs, he was stunned for a moment and asked, "It's so late. Why haven't you gone to bed yet?" I didn't even look at him and replied coldly, "Does it matter to you whether I sleep or not?" James's face darkened instantly. But he suppressed his anger and asked in a deep voice, "What did you want to tell me just now?" My voice was cold, "It's nothing. It was something insignificant, and I've already forgotten it." James stared at me quietly for more than 10 seconds. Finally, he said, "Coincidentally, I have something to say." I twitched the corners of my mouth and gave a sarcastic smile. James took a deep breath and said word by word, "Mia, let's get a divorce." Even though I had already known the result. When I heard those words, my heart still ached and clenched into a ball. The warm yellow light shone on James's handsome face. There was only determination on his face, without the slightest trace of guilt. I tried my best to suppress the trembling in my voice and asked, "Why? I want to know the reason." When the man talked about the woman he loved, his eyes were gentle and tender. He said, "Actually, I've been with Evelyn for 7 years. She is the partner who is soul matched with me. Every moment with her is full of romance and surprises. She understands all my unspoken words and the meaning behind every look in my eyes. But what about being with you? The topics you talk about are always about orders and business. To you, I'm just a money-making robot." Unlike when he mentioned Evelyn, his eyes were filled with disgust when he talked about me. I dug my nails into my palms so hard that it hurt. He said, in those hardest years, if it weren't for Evelyn accompanying me, I wouldn't have achieved what I have today. I might have been driven crazy by you long ago. James's words stabbed me deeply. Don't I want to enjoy the beauty of nature, to travel to mountains, rivers, lakes and seas? Don't I want to pursue poetry and a distant dream? But those bank loans needed to be repaid. The rent and property management fees of the company needed to be paid. The employees' salaries needed to be issued, and the Social Security needed to be paid. I couldn't afford to be willful and stop in the face of huge economic pressure. Since I chose to start a business, I was bound to endure more hardships, bear greater pressure and shoulder more responsibilities than when I was working for others. I can't describe how disheartened and disappointed I felt. I sneered, so your so-called soulmate is someone who cheats on their partner. You two are really a perfect match in that regard. I can't compare to you at all. James's face turned red instantly, but his eyes gradually turned cold. Anyway, I must divorce you. Evelyn is pregnant, and the child is mine. Tears welled up in my eyes despite my efforts to hold them back. The scene when James courted me in the past was still vivid in my mind. Now he was telling me that another woman was pregnant with his child, and that he wanted a divorce. I raised my hand and slapped him hard across the face. James, you're a beast. The thing I regret most in my life is marrying you. James's face was turned to one side by my slap. He was stunned for a moment and then remained silent without saying anything more. James and I met and got to know each other on the university campus. He was the one who courted me. Because he was too afraid to confess, he drank a can of beer that day. His face was red, and his ears were also red. He blocked my way to the library and stammered, Mia, I like you. Would you like to be my girlfriend? I looked at the handsome boy who was half a head taller than me, and unconsciously, my face turned red. But I didn't agree. Who would agree to a confession from a drunk person? Later, James appeared downstairs of our dormitory every day. He bought breakfast for me and my roommates, and helped me reserve a seat in the library. My roommates all advised me to seize the opportunity with James. They said I would definitely regret it if I missed such a good guy. In my sophomore year of college, James and I got together. He gave me plenty of love and a sense of security. He once looked at me with sincere eyes and promised, Mia, I will only be good to you for the rest of my life. How ridiculous. A man's acting when he's a bit drunk can make you cry. From beginning to end, the only one who was lost in that dream and didn't want to wake up was myself. There was finally a hint of guilt in James's eyes. But it wasn't for me. He licked his dry lips and said, Evelyn has been by my side since she graduated from college. She accompanied me through the hardest days to today. Now that she's pregnant with my child, I must give her a proper status. With tears in my eyes, I asked angrily in return, didn't I follow you right after graduating from college? Didn't I accompany you through the hardest days to today? James had a cold look on his face. Yes, that's why I'll compensate you when we get a divorce. Compensate me? I laughed until tears came out. I graduated from college at the age of 23 and got married to him right away. After starting the business, in order to save money, we squeezed into a basement that cost 450 yuan a month for rent. In that damp and narrow basement, I learned to catch cockroaches with my bare hands and use mouse traps to catch mice. In order to save money to pay off the loans, we would go to the vegetable market to buy the cheapest green leafy vegetables just before it closed. Eating braised beef noodles was considered a treat for us. In the hardest times, we managed to get by with only 10 yuan for 3 days. We ate steamed buns for every meal. It was not until 2 years later that the company gradually got on the right track, and our lives began to get a little better. The villa we live in now was bought 2 years ago. From getting the house to decorating it, and then to waiting for the smell to dissipate so that it was suitable to move in, we have been living here for less than half a year. James took on the tone of a negotiator. Mia, let go gracefully. The company was built up with Evelyn by my side, so I won't give it to you. But all the other properties will be yours. These assets in exchange for your 10 years are not a bad deal for you. After all, the money you earn from working for 10 years might not even be enough to buy the yard of this villa. It felt like there was a raging fire burning in my chest. I raised my hand again and slapped him hard across the face. This slap was even more forceful. James staggered from my slap and then bent over and retched. I stood beside him and watched coldly as his neck veins bulged due to retching. Just then, James's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and wiped the corner of his mouth with the back of his hand. Evelyn, what's up? His voice was affectionate and gentle. He deliberately answered Evelyn's call in front of me. James glanced at me and said into the phone, "Don't worry. Since I promised to give you an explanation, I won't break my promise. Whether Mia agrees or not, I'm definitely getting a divorce. I know. Tomorrow is the day for the baby's fetal heart rate monitoring. I won't forget. I'll drive to pick you up then." He brazenly flirted with Evelyn in front of me. At that moment, looking at his ugly face, the only thought in my mind was, getting cancer is your retribution. I turned around and went downstairs. A few minutes later, those examination reports turned into a pile of ashes in the back garden of the villa. From now on, whether this scumbag lives or dies has nothing to do with me. I didn't expect that Evelyn would actually dare to ask me to meet. She probably came to show off her victory. As the legal wife, I naturally wasn't afraid of her. I contacted my friend Vivian, who is an online celebrity relationship blogger. She has nearly 2 million followers on the video platform. I asked her to secretly film the video of my meeting with Evelyn. It might come in handy in the future. The meeting place was in a coffee shop. When I arrived, Evelyn was already sitting at the table. When she saw me walking into the coffee shop, she stood up holding her belly. "Mia, over here." Looking at her enthusiasm, if someone didn't know the situation, they would think that we were close friends. Vivian deliberately entered the store a few minutes later, and sat at a table diagonally behind us. Evelyn's belly was quite big, looking about 5 or 6 months pregnant. She crossed her hands on the table and put on a sweet smile. "Mia, I ordered you a mocha. It's your favorite." I put my bag beside me and looked at her coldly, not knowing what she was up to. She picked up the glass of boiled water in front of her and took a sip. "Mia, don't be so hostile to me. It's your fault that you've been married to Brother James for so many years and still haven't had a child to tie him down. If you had a child now, would he be so eager to divorce you?" I didn't want to listen to her nonsense at first, but thinking that my friend was recording the video, I gave a bitter smile and said, "You two have been having an affair behind my back since 7 years ago. I'm actually glad that I don't have a child." Evelyn smiled triumphantly. "Mia, you have the kindness of discovering my talent. Actually, I didn't plan to compete with you. That's why I used to persuade James to be tolerant of you. If I really wanted to compete with you, do you think you could have been Mrs. James for so long?" There was nothing but mockery and contempt on her face. "However, now that I have James's child, I can live without a proper status, but my child can't. This is my responsibility as a mother." She said it with great righteousness. But I thought her logic was really ridiculous. I sneered, "If you were a responsible mother, you shouldn't have been someone else's mistress from the very beginning. Right?" Evelyn was taken aback and couldn't say a word. I don't know if it was because of anger and embarrassment, but her words became mean. "Do you know? James has long been tired of you. He said you're dull and uninteresting, just like the meals you cook. With you, he lives such a plain life that has no surprises and can be seen through at a glance. James loves spicy food, but you insist on learning some health preservation methods. The dishes you cook are low in salt and oil, and he can hardly swallow them every time. You don't really think he ate all the meals you sent to the company, do you?" "He asked me to throw them all away. He prefers the lunches I prepared for him. He clearly wants a banana, but you insist on giving him an apple. No matter how much you give. It's just to move yourself. I gently stirred the coffee and asked without looking up, so all these years, you've been cooking spicy dishes that suit James' taste? Evelyn raised her chin slightly, looking extremely proud. Of course. I'm not like you, imposing my own preferences on others. I finally understood why James' stomach problem had developed into cancer. Several years ago, because James had a gastric hemorrhage after drinking, I took him for a gastroposcopy. At that time, the doctor told me that he had mild atrophic gastritis. He needed to pay strict attention to his diet. So I had been preparing nutritious meals for him according to the standards of being easy to digest, highly nutritious, and avoiding spicy and raw food. I didn't expect that it all ended up in the trash. At this moment, I couldn't tell whether Evelyn was an enemy or a friend. Is this the purpose of you asking me here today? I looked at the woman opposite me leisurely. Evelyn leaned gently against the backrest of the sofa and stroked her lower abdomen with her hands. She suddenly asked, Mia, have you always thought of yourself as very capable? As someone with great means? As the leading lady in life? I frowned, not knowing where these words came from. It was so inexplicable. Evelyn seemed to be lost in memories. When I graduated from junior college and stayed in this city, I applied for many jobs. But those companies either disliked my low education or my lack of work experience. I had interviews with dozens of companies, and only you didn't mind my lack of work experience and kept me on. As she said this, she propped herself up with her hands and leaned back a bit. Probably because she was already quite far along in her pregnancy. Sitting on the low sofa made her feel strained. But do you remember how you treated me in those years? Her emotions became a bit agitated. I filled out a small report strongly. And you pointed at my nose and scolded me for a long time. I just booked your flight and are wrong and you called me stupid. In front of so many people, you scolded me for nearly 20 minutes. But I'm here to work. Although you pay me, I also put in the corresponding labor. I'm not your slave, Mia, and I'm not your dog either. There were faint tears in her eyes. It seemed that the humiliation she had suffered in the past hadn't lessened at all. She continued later, I worked extremely hard. Was very cautious at work, and tried my best to please you. Only then did you start to look at me a little more seriously. But you're also from the countryside. What right do you have to look down on me? What right do you have to marry such an excellent man as James? I'm not willing to accept that. I almost spat out the coffee in my mouth. Her logic really left me speechless. Evelyn, if you're crazy, please go to the hospital. You said you made a small mistake in filling out the report, but do you know that report was to be submitted to the regulatory department? Your small mistake could have caused the company to face a huge fine. You delayed my flight by an hour. And just because of that hour, I missed the connecting flight, which made my entire itinerary arrangement invalid. Shouldn't you be scolded for that? I took pity on you as a newbie, criticized you, and also gave you a chance to correct your mistakes. I didn't expect you to hold a grudge. After all, you and James are really a good match. I didn't think it was necessary to continue the conversation. Facing such an ungrateful person, continuing to talk would just be a waste of my time. I smiled with relief, stood up, and said to her, you just want to be with James, right? I will let you have your way. I also hope you can love each other until death. Evelyn's mouth twitched, and then she looked up to meet my gaze. Her tone was extremely certain. Of course I will love him until death. From now on, I will be the wife of the president of the listed company, and you are just a divorced woman. Although I really wanted to slap her right now. But she was pregnant, and I didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble for myself because of a momentary impulse. I agreed to James' divorce terms. In order to avoid waiting for the 1-month divorce schooling off period. He probably was also afraid that I would suddenly change my mind. So he entrusted a lawyer to directly file for divorce in court. Since I signed the divorce agreement, James moved out of the villa. My parents-in-law learned the news that we were going to get a divorce and rushed over from our hometown in a hurry. Both James and I are from the countryside. But my family's financial situation was much better than James. My father contracted to mountains, one for planting ornamental trees and the other for fruit trees. The ornamental trees were all of relatively expensive varieties. When I got married, my father gave me a card as a dowry, which had 2 million yuan in it. This was also the startup capital for James' business. My parents-in-law are honest people. Because of this, they have always loved me very much. Except for the constant urging to have a baby, which made me a bit annoyed, there was nothing else to fault. My mother-in-law held my hand and kept wiping away her tears. She said I didn't need to worry. And she would definitely make that scoundrel apologize to me. But she made dozens of phone calls. Her son didn't answer a single one. In the end, he even blocked her number. She was so angry that her chest rose and fell and she beat her chest and cried, "How could our family have such a scoundrel like him? He's only been successful for a few days and he's already abandoned his mother and his wife." My father-in-law squatted on the balcony, sighing, but there was nothing he could do. Before leaving, my mother-in-law assured me again and again that the James family would only recognize me as their daughter-in-law, and no one else would be allowed to enter the James family. I gave a bitter smile but didn't say anything more. The baby in Evelyn's belly was their grandson. James was their son. Even though they were angry and resentful at this moment. After all, blood is thicker than water, and they would still be a family in the end. James moved in with Evelyn. In the WeChat moments that Evelyn posted every day, there were all kinds of delicious food she prepared for James, such as chopped pepper fish head, spicy crayfish, spicy chicken. In the corner of the photos, there would always be a glimpse of James' well-defined hands and his broad back. I looked at those spicy and delicious dishes and couldn't help but laugh. He'd eat like this for a few more weeks and see how long he can last. In just 2 weeks, I received the divorce judgment. The properties under James' name were gradually transferred to my name. I used the money I got from the divorce to register a company, and most of its business content overlapped with that of James' company. Amen may betray me. But my career and money won't. Selecting the location, decoration, employee recruitment training, and market promotion all took me a lot of time. It was already half a year later when the studio was running normally. I heard that Evelyn's child had been born, and she was recently preparing for her wedding with James. I sneered in my heart. I hope they will like the wedding gift I send them. When Evelyn rushed into my company, I had just seen off the clients who came to discuss cooperation. When she saw me, she rushed towards me like a madwoman. "Mia, you bitch. You actually went to my hometown to spread rumors. I'm going to fight you." I sneered. "Spread rumors? If you dare to do those things, are you still afraid of others talking about them? I'll just ask you one thing. Are the things written on those flyers really what you said with your own mouth?" After learning that Evelyn was going to have a wedding with James, I specially went to Evelyn's hometown. I distributed the beautifully made flyers, which were prepared in advance by a design company, to every villager in the village. The content was exactly what she had confessed to me in the coffee shop. How she betrayed her trust. How she had an affair with a married man, and how she got pregnant before marriage to force the legal wife to step down. The designer deliberately printed the words in large size, for fear that the elderly people in the village couldn't see them clearly. Originally, Evelyn's family had been boasting in the village about how amazing their daughter was. They said she had found a young and promising president of a listed company. Evelyn's family had been showing off so much that some people had already been annoyed by them. Now that they knew Evelyn was working as a mistress outside, the villagers almost poked the backs of her parents' spines apart. Although James quickly bought a house for them in the city. But the two people who had lived in the countryside for most of their lives had all their social connections with relatives and friends in their hometown. No matter how much they tried to hide, they couldn't escape the gossip. I didn't want to watch Evelyn go crazy in my company, so I asked two female colleagues to drag her out. After locking the glass door from the inside, she banged on the door and roared, "Mia, you wait for me, I'm going to find a lawyer to sue you." just wait for the court summons. I smiled contemptuously and didn't care at all. Then I'll be waiting for the good news. You'd better keep your word. If the judge orders me to make a public apology, then I'll release a statement across the whole internet and sincerely apologize to you Tim, the scumbag man and the bitch woman. I emphasized the words scumbag man and bitch woman very heavily. Evelyn's face turned green and white with anger. I waved my hand at her and turned around gracefully, heading back to my office. Of course, I wouldn't just deal with Evelyn and let that disgusting scumbag man stay out of trouble perfectly. It's just that I needed to wait for a better opportunity. Soon, that opportunity came. The product that James' company had been researching and developing for 3 years was about to be launched on the market. In these 3 years, he had invested a large amount of capital and manpower in the new product and attracted countless investments. This product could be said to be a crucial battle for James' company. If they failed in this battle at the least, the capital chain would be broken, and at the worst, there might be a risk of bankruptcy. James' company didn't have strong capital in the first place. At that time, I advised him to go light and not to go public. Firstly, it could avoid the pressure of financial disclosure, and secondly, it could reduce the risk of financing costs. Once the company goes public, even if you are the president of the company, you no longer have absolute decision-making power in your hands. But he didn't listen at all and went his own way. The launch date of James' company's new product was set for March 18th. On March 17th, I first anonymously reported James' company for tax evasion to the Tax Bureau. I also reported James' company to the Industry and Commerce Department for false propaganda and using improper means for commercial competition. Finally, I reported James' company to the Labor Bureau for not paying Social Security for all employees according to the law. I even wrote a letter to the fire department to report that James' company didn't have complete fire protection facilities. James had just held a new product launch conference in the morning. In the afternoon, I asked Vivian to help me release the video of my meeting with Evelyn. The title of the video was, President James, who has always built an image of a loving husband, has been married for 10 years, but has been having an affair behind his wife's back for 7 years. In the video, my friend put a mosaic on Evelyn and also changed her voice. But the name James that she mentioned many times in the conversation was extremely clear. Vivian was originally an emotional blogger with millions of followers, so the video already had a certain level of popularity after it was released. In addition to promoting this video, I also contacted several marketing accounts to edit and repost it. On that day, the #1 trending topic was the launch of James' company's new product. From the 2nd to the 6th trending topics were all about James' extramarital affair. Both James and his company became a hot topic. In just 3 trading days, the stock price of James' company dropped by 37%, and its market value was directly halved. The newly launched product was once boycotted. But this was just an appetizer. James was extremely busy and worried. On one hand, he spent money to suppress all the negative news about himself. On the other hand, he was busy dealing with the accusations from the company's shareholders. I was in a great mood and invited my friends to have hot pot together. The waiter led us to a small private room on the 2nd floor. Unexpectedly, in the private room next door were James and Evelyn. Their voices could be heard clearly. James, I'm already annoyed enough now, and you still insist on making me accompany you to eat hot pot. Can't you just invite your own friends? Evelyn cockathiously said, Oh, I gave birth to a son for you and worked so hard to breastfeed. I haven't eaten delicious food with strong flavors for more than a year. Now that the baby is drinking milk powder, I just want to change my taste a bit. James said irritably, If you hadn't been so stupid as to go to that woman on your own initiative, would I be scolded by those shareholders? Evelyn said pitifully, I was suppressed by her for so long. I've been your mistress like a mouse in the gutter for so many years. I just wanted to let out my anger. Who knew she was so vicious and scheming? She actually asked someone to film the video. Husband, I know I was wrong. I won't do it again in the future. James let out a heavy sigh. In the end, he didn't say anything more. After a while, James' voice sounded again, let's change to a clear soup pot. My stomach has been burning and hurting recently. This spicy pot is too spicy and greasy. Evelyn didn't care at all. I specifically came here to eat the super spicy pot. You used to like the taste of this place too. James didn't say anything more. Halfway through the hot pot meal, there came a violent coughing sound from the next private room. The coughing sound got louder and louder, and then he started vomiting. With the intention of watching the excitement, I quickly rushed out of the private room. I lifted the curtain of the next room. I saw James holding onto the table, spitting out blood in large mouthfuls. Evelyn shook James in horror. Husband, what's wrong with you? Don't scare me. The waiters in the restaurant immediately called 120. A group of people gathered around the door of the private room to watch. It was not until the medical staff arrived that the people gathered around gradually dispersed. James was hospitalized. After the admission examination, he was diagnosed with the terminal stage of gastric cancer. The cancer cells had spread throughout his body, and there were dozens of brain metastases even in his head. I posted the video I took in the hot pot restaurant, which showed the ambulance taking away James, who was spitting out blood, on the internet. It caused a huge stir. James was already deeply involved in a scandal. After the new product was launched, it encountered great resistance. That the news of him spitting out blood and being hospitalized, it caused infinite panic among the stockholders, and they started to sell their stocks one after another. The stock price of James' company plummeted like a free fall. The market value evaporated, triggering a series of chain reactions. The bank urgently recalled the loan limit and refused to provide new financial support. The business partners one after another terminated the cooperation agreements. And just at this moment, the last straw that broke the camel's back came. It was revealed on the internet that James' company was being investigated for tax evasion, was interviewed by the Industry and Commerce Department for improper commercial competition, and was fined by the fire department, etc. I knew that James' company was about to go bankrupt. Evelyn was stunned. She thought that after marrying James, she would enjoy endless wealth and glory. But now, in just a little over half a year, James is not only seriously ill but also burdened with huge debts. Due to the dismal sales of the new product that have persisted for a long time, James' capital chain has broken. James is lying in the hospital bed receiving chemotherapy and can no longer rush around to find new investments. Worried about the company, he asked Evelyn to manage it on his behalf. However, within just 2 weeks of taking over, Evelyn offended a major shareholder and even drove away a core backbone of the company. When James learned about this, he became so anxious that his illness worsened. Unable to repay the loans, assets such as the properties and cars under James' name were successively sealed by the court, and the company's and his personal bank accounts were frozen. The company's operations completely came to a standstill. But there were still employees' salaries to be paid. In the end, it had no choice but to go into bankruptcy liquidation. Just when James was on his deathbed, Evelyn proposed to divorce him. She didn't want the custody of the child and gave it to James. After considering it for 2 days, James agreed. After getting the divorce certificate, he desperately called me, wanting to meet me one last time. Remembering that his parents had treated me well, I went to the hospital. The moment I saw James, I was shocked beyond measure. His once handsome face was now so emaciated that he almost looked like a skeleton. His sunken cheeks were terrifying, and his face was ashen gray. When he saw me coming, he struggled to get up. But after trying for a long time, he still failed. I stood more than a meter away from the hospital bed and looked at him coldly. "Why did you ask me to come here? What do you want?" James was panting heavily. "Mia, I just want to say sorry to you. Lying in this hospital bed these days, I've thought through a lot of things. I've let you down. I deserve everything that has happened to me now. Tears welled up in his cloudy eyes. I showed no emotional fluctuations and still looked at him calmly. He struggled with great effort and took out a bank card from under the pillow. This is the money I've hidden. It's an account open with my mother's ID card. There's more than 2 million yuan in it, and the password is your birthday. He coughed violently again. After his breathing stabilized, he said in a hoarse voice, "My parents are getting old. After I die, can you take care of them for me? And can you help my parents handle my funeral arrangements?" I didn't take the bank card. James' hand was too tired to hold it up, and it fell heavily back onto the bed. I replied, "I don't think I have the time. You can ask Evelyn to take care of your parents. You can also entrust her with your funeral arrangements. After all, she is your soulmate. I'm afraid I'll dirty the path of your reincarnation." James opened his mouth but couldn't say anything more. "James, you actually dared to give money to this woman behind my back. I didn't get a single cent from you in the divorce, and you still think of other women." The door of the ward was kicked open violently. Evelyn's eyes were bloodshot, and she threw her bag at James' head, once, huzzah, twice. I didn't want to watch them fight like dogs, so I quietly left the ward. When I reached the nurses' station, I reminded them that there was a fight in Ward 702. A few days later, the news of James' death came. Originally, he could have lived for a while longer, but due to Evelyn's violent beating, after being rescued in the ICU for a few days, he still passed away. And Evelyn was taken away by the police on suspicion of intentional injury. What awaited her was severe punishment by the law. Not long after James was buried, I received an EMS envelope at my company. It was sent from the tumor hospital. When I opened it, it was the bank card that James gave me in the ward. Presumably, before he died, he asked the hospital staff to send it to me. When I got divorced, I had already received the property that I deserved. I wouldn't take anything else, and I didn't want to have any more connections with him. I took the bank card and went back to James' hometown. I handed the card to his parents. Whether they use this money for their old age or to raise James' son, it's no longer something I should care about. James' mother invited me to stay for dinner, but I politely refused. Once, I was fortunate enough to be their family member for a while. But now that our fate has ended, we need to walk on our own separate paths. On the way back, the gloom of many days finally dissipated completely, and the long-lost sunlight broke through the clouds. I rolled down the car window. The gentle breeze, carrying the fresh smell after the rain, blew through my hair. I stepped on the accelerator lightly, and the car accelerated. I'm heading towards a brand new life.